The Valiant Hold station shuddered under the onslaught, a darkened skyline of broken hulls and blinking red lights. Gabe Cortez stood on the command deck, the battle raging outside his window, a fiery reminder that humanity was on the brink. His hands gripped the edge of the console, knuckles white. The hum of the station's power systems was drowned out by the constant drone of alarms. Vorkan warships filled the viewports, dozens, each one massive, their gun turrets glowing like the eyes of beasts hunting their prey. Gabe had seen it all before. He had seen Earth burn, his family die, and now, it seemed, the last spark of humanity would flicker and fade out. He exhaled slowly. This is it. Again, Sergeant Cortez, report. The voice of Captain Arden came over his comms, sharp and urgent. Arden was good, no, great, but even he couldn't hold back the fear in his voice. None of them could. The last remnants of Earth's forces were trapped here, 1,000,000 miles from salvation. And the Vorkans were relentless. All defenses holding for now, Gabe replied, not looking away from the viewport. But we're on borrowed time. They've figured out our weak spots. They're about to break through the outer hull. We need to buy time. Arden's voice crackled with a quiet resolve. Initiate Plan B, prepare the last line of defense. Understood. Gabe didn't hesitate. He was already moving. No time for doubts now. He toggled a few switches, transmitting a signal to the lower decks where his squad awaited. You heard him, team. We're moving out. Last chance to do something about this hell. One by one, the faces of his team flickered onto his HUD. Their expressions were grim. It was always grim. But there was a fire in their eyes, the same fire that had carried them through the worst this war had thrown at them. Give them hell, sir, Private Mendez said, his grin a flash of confidence in the chaos. Just stay alive, Mendez, Gabe muttered, as he made his way to the lift. His boots echoed through the empty corridors as the ship's trembling grew more violent with every passing second. The Valiant Hold was dying, just like the rest of humanity. The lift door slid open, and Gabe stepped into the war room. The place was chaos. Holographic displays flared and dimmed, with alerts flashing on every screen. It was a nerve-wracking mix of critical intel and survival strategies, all under the flickering light of damaged power conduits. The crew had fought to keep the station alive, but now, even the hardiest systems were failing. Status report? Gabe barked, his eyes scanning the room. Lieutenant Ward was huddled over a console, his face bathed in the cold blue light of the station's emergency systems. Vorkan forces breaking through in 3 minutes. All secondary lines of defense have failed, Ward said without looking up. His voice was heavy with the knowledge that the odds were too high to overcome. 3 minutes, huh? Gabe didn't flinch. Not enough. Send the order. We're going with Plan B. Activate the defense pods. Yes, sir, Ward replied, immediately sending the orders. As Gabe prepared to leave, his mind raced. Plan B was their last card. If it worked, they might slow the Vorkans down long enough to get more time to evacuate. If it failed, well, the human race could kiss their future goodbye. The team's armor-clad footsteps were synchronized as they charged through the halls, racing toward the primary hangar bay. Gabe's heartbeat thrummed in his chest. His squad members, Harris, Mendez, and the rest, had trained for this moment, but even the best plans often fell apart under fire. They arrived at the hangar just as the outer bulkheads collapsed, the first wave of Vorkan soldiers pushing through the wreckage. Gabe's breath caught in his throat. A line of Vorkan infantry, towering and relentless, stormed in, each soldier covered in sleek, obsidian black armor, their forms silhouetted against the dim light of the hangar's emergency systems. They were an unstoppable tide of terror. Mendez didn't flinch. Ready, sir. His voice had a deadly calm to it now, his rifle raised, the barrel smoking from the previous burst. Hold your ground, Gabe ordered. The team scattered into positions, their rifles aimed at the approaching enemy. We're not dying here, Gabe swore to himself. The first shot cracked the air, a deafening roar that sent shockwaves through Gabe's bones. He fired, taking down the first Vorkan. Then another. The others followed suit, but their numbers were overwhelming. The aliens charged forward like a wave breaking over a dam, their weapons unleashing torrents of plasma that seared through metal and flesh alike. "Come on, you bastards!" Gabe shouted, his voice rising over the noise of gunfire and explosions. His squad returned fire, cutting down the alien advance, but more were coming. He could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on him. Activate the pods. Now. He tapped his wrist calm, relaying the order. There was a moment of pause, a silent lull in the battle, before the hangar shuddered again. The defense pods launched from their platforms, hurling themselves into the Vorkan lines. The explosion was deafening, the entire hangar flashing white. But when the light cleared, the Vorkans were still advancing, their numbers undiminished. "Not enough," Gabe muttered under his breath. His hand tightened on his rifle. "We can't hold them off forever." "Sir!" Harris's voice snapped him out of his thoughts. He was kneeling near the bulkhead, a bloody mess of armor and limbs sprawled around him. "We've got a problem." Gabe rushed over, ignoring the heat of the fires around him. "What's going on?" Harris's eyes met his, wide with a mix of fear and disbelief. It's one of our own. A mole. The Vorkans knew about the pods, about our plan." Gabe froze, the realization slamming into him like a freight train. "Who?" he growled, stepping back. Harris didn't answer. He just pointed toward the corner of the hangar. There, standing in the shadows, was someone familiar, someone who shouldn't have been there. Someone who had betrayed them. Captain Arden. Gabe's heart pounded. "You son of a..." Arden's grin was tight, cold. "You didn't really think this was going to be easy, did you, Cortez? This was always the plan." Gabe raised his rifle. "You sold us out." "I sold humanity out," Arden corrected. "There's nothing left but the strong, Cortez. You were always too idealistic." The betrayal hit harder than any blast of plasma could. Gabe's mind screamed with fury, but there was no time to act. Arden was already moving, his hand gesturing to the Vorkan soldiers, who closed in like vultures to a carcass. And in that moment, Gabe knew that this fight, this war, had just changed forever. Chapter 2 awaits, but for now, it's survival. The Valiant Hold station groaned as Gabe Cortez raced through the corridors, his heart still pounding from the revelation. Arden, the one man Gabe had trusted implicitly, had sold them out. Betrayal burned in his gut, colder than any wound he'd ever taken. He pushed the feeling aside. There was no time for anger. The war was still on, and humanity's survival was all that mattered now. His squad was scattered, fighting off Vorkan forces, trying to hold the line. He wasn't sure how many had made it out of the hangar alive, but he couldn't let it consume him. Stay focused. Stay alive. Gabe arrived at the main command center panting, sweat dripping from his brow. The station's emergency lights flickered, casting long shadows across the room. Ward, the young lieutenant who had become like a brother in arms, stood at the console, face grim, fingers flying over the holographic display. "They're coming," Ward said without turning. His voice was calm, but Gabe could hear the tension in it. "The Vorkans are pulling back, regrouping. I don't know how long we've got." Gabe stepped forward, scanning the data. The Vorkan forces weren't retreating, they were adapting, recalibrating for a more brutal assault. The defensive pods had slowed them down, but not enough. The station was still vulnerable. "We need to pull back," Gabe said, his voice low but firm. "Regroup and make for the evacuation zones. It's not a fight we're going to win here." Ward shook his head, his eyes intense. "We don't have enough ships to evacuate. Most of the fleet's been scattered, and the Vorkans are sweeping the outer colonies. This is our last stand, Gabe." Gabe clenched his jaw. "Then we make sure it counts." His mind raced as he thought through their options. Every minute they stayed here made it more likely that the Vorkans would overpower them. But they couldn't just give up, not without doing everything they could to make this war cost the invaders more than they were willing to pay. His gaze flickered to the hollow screen where they mapped the Vorkan positions. A chill ran down his spine. "Hold on," Gabe muttered. He pointed to a line of data on the screen. "There's a pattern here. They're coming at us in waves, but there's something off. The reinforcements, they're coordinated." Ward's eyes widened. "Coordinated? But they knew about the pods," Gabe finished for him. "The attack's not random. Someone's feeding them information. We've got a mole among us." Ward's face turned pale. "You think it's Arden?" Gabe didn't answer immediately. He could feel the weight of the betrayal gnawing at him. But there was no time for second guessing. If Arden had turned, then there was a whole network working against them. "We need to find out. Now." The alarm bells rang through the command center, pulling them from their conversation. A loud explosion echoed in the distance. The Vorkans were moving in again. Time had run out. "Evac's still not ready, sir," Ward said, his voice tight. "We can't hold out much longer. We need to decide what to do." Gabe gritted his teeth, weighing the options. The station had become a fortress with crumbling walls, but they had one chance, one move left. He looked at the map again. There was a small outpost near the station's lower decks, abandoned for years, but still operational. If they could rig it to overload and take out the Vorkan supply lines, they might be able to buy the remaining survivors more time. Gabe turned to Ward. "Get the team together. We're going for the outpost. It's our only shot at slowing them down." Ward hesitated for a split second. "But what about Arden?" Gabe's jaw tightened. "We'll deal with him later. Right now we fight." Ward nodded, his face set in determination. "Understood." The journey to the lower decks was a crawl, the halls of the Valiant Hold now bathed in darkness, punctuated only by the flickering emergency lights. The station's corridors were eerie, filled with the echoes of desperate footsteps. Gabe's team met up along the way, a silent but steady march toward their destination. When they reached the lower outposts, Gabe felt the tension in the air, the gravity of their mission pressing down on him. This was the last option. If they couldn't get to the outpost's core and initiate the overload sequence, there would be no more moves left. The Vorkans would have them. As they neared the control room, Gabe saw a group of Vorkan soldiers stationed outside, their sleek black armor reflecting the dim lights of the station. They were like machines, systematically sweeping through the area. Gabe crouched behind a support beam, signaling for his team to do the same. Mendez looked at him, his expression tight with impatience. "You want to take them out silently, sir?" Mendez asked in a low voice, fingers hovering over the trigger of his rifle. Gabe shook his head. "We don't have time for stealth. Go loud. We need to hit them fast." Mendez nodded, his grip tightening. "On your mark." Gabe's heart pounded, his instincts kicking in. "Go." The air exploded with the roar of gunfire as Gabe's squad moved in. The Vorkans had no chance to react. Mendez's rifle barked in rapid succession, dropping the first alien soldier in seconds. Gabe's team followed suit, their shots precise and deadly. The Vorkans didn't know what hit them. Within moments, the area was cleared. Gabe motioned to the door of the control room. "Move! Now!" They stormed inside, taking control of the outpost systems. Gabe's eyes scanned the console, his fingers flying over the controls, searching for the overload sequence. His mind was sharp, calculating. If they could get this right, they'd force the Vorkans to pull back and regroup. At least for a while. "Almost there," Gabe muttered, sweat dripping down his forehead as the countdown clock began ticking. Just then, a voice echoed through the comms, crackling, familiar. It made Gabe freeze in his tracks. "Sergeant Cortez." Arden's voice was calm, almost too calm, as if he had all the time in the world. "You didn't really think I'd let you get away with this, did you?" Gabe's blood ran cold. Arden wasn't just a traitor. He was close, too close. The realization hit him like a sledgehammer. Arden had been tracking them, guiding the Vorkans straight to the outpost. It was too late to stop the plan now. "Arden!" Gabe's voice was low, deadly. "You should have stayed out of this. Arden's laughter crackled through the calms. You still don't understand, Cortez. There's no way out of this. It was never about winning. It's about survival. The timer was ticking. Gabe didn't have time for this. With a sharp motion, he hit the final command. The explosion that followed was a shockwave that shook the very foundations of the Valiant Hold. Gabe barely had time to brace himself as the walls trembled, but he knew one thing: the fight wasn't over. It had just begun. The station trembled with the aftershock of the explosion. Gabe Cortez's ears rang from the blast as debris rained down, the walls groaning in protest. His breath came in sharp gasps, heart pounding in his chest. He glanced around, scanning the faces of his remaining squad. They were battered but alive for now. The outpost's core had detonated, ripping through the Vorkan supply lines, but at a cost. The blast had triggered alarms, and Vorkan reinforcements were already on their way. Move! Gabe barked, his voice cutting through the chaos. Get to the extraction point. Now! His squad moved swiftly, their footsteps heavy but purposeful. Every one of them had the same grim resolve. They were alive, but they were also running out of time. Gabe's mind raced as he led them through the corridors of the Valiant Hold, navigating the damage. The station's lights flickered in and out, casting long, haunting shadows against the jagged walls. The air was thick with the smell of burning metal, the hum of failing systems vibrating in every step. How much longer, sir? Mendez called over his shoulder, voice tight with worry. Vorkans are right behind us. Gabe didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned a corner, pausing to check the hallway ahead. The main escape route was compromised. The evacuation bay had been destroyed in the earlier explosion, and now they were trapped. The only way out was through the maintenance tunnels, a route that would take them beneath the station, deep into the bowels of the wreckage. Through the tunnels, Gabe said, voice low but firm. It's our only option. They turned toward a maintenance hatch. The air was growing colder as they descended into the station's lower levels. Gabe's nerves were raw. He could feel the weight of every decision pressing down on him. The explosion had bought them some time, but it wasn't enough. The Vorkans would adapt quickly, and they'd be back, more relentless than ever. If they didn't escape the Valiant Hold soon, they wouldn't make it out alive. In the tight, dimly lit tunnels, their movements were muffled, and the silence was suffocating. The only sound was the echo of their breath and the occasional creak of metal as the station groaned under its wounds. Gabe kept his eyes on the path ahead, his hand never straying far from his rifle. His mind replayed the events of the last few hours, the betrayal, the overwhelming odds they were facing. And then Arden's voice, cold, confident. He'd sold them out. Gabe clenched his jaw, pushing the thought aside. There was no time for anger, no time for revenge. Not yet. The Vorkans were still hunting them, and they would stop at nothing to finish what they started. They reached an intersection in the tunnels. Gabe's instincts screamed. Something was off. He held up a fist, signaling the team to stop. Everyone froze, their weapons raised, their eyes scanning the darkness. They're here, Gabe muttered. His breath came in slow, steady bursts. They've set a trap. Before anyone could react, the sound of heavy boots echoed through the tunnel. Shadows shifted, moving with terrifying precision. The Vorkans were closing in, their forms barely visible in the darkness. Gabe's stomach tightened. He could feel it, the inevitable clash that was about to erupt. He motioned for Mendez and Harris to take cover on either side. The squad spread out, their rifles ready. There was no way out. It was time to fight. A deep, booming voice echoed down the corridor. I know you're there, Cortez. It was Arden. You're not going anywhere. Gabe's pulse quickened. He had to make a decision, and he had to make it now. The Vorkans would be upon them in seconds, and the only way out was to confront Arden. There was no longer any question, he needed answers. He needed to end this. Arden! Gabe shouted, his voice carrying through the dark. You're making a mistake. This isn't you. A harsh laugh rang out, echoing off the cold walls of the tunnel. You still don't get it, do you? I've seen what's coming. Humanity is doomed, Cortez. We were always meant to be slaves, not saviors. The Vorkans are the future, and you're too blind to see it. This is just survival. Gabe's blood boiled, but he steadied himself. This was no longer about saving humanity. It was about stopping Arden from sealing their fate. The traitor was their key to understanding how deep the Vorkan infiltration went. If they couldn't stop him now, the war would be lost. The first wave of Vorkan soldiers rounded the corner, their red eyes glowing in the darkness, weapons raised. Gabe's squad opened fire. Mendez's rifle cracked, dropping the first soldier in an instant. Harris followed suit, his shots precise. But it wasn't enough. The Vorkans were relentless, more of them, storming in like a tidal wave, weapons firing in synchronized chaos. Gabe moved, his rifle aimed, his fingers steady on the trigger. He was like a machine, efficient, deadly, focused. Every shot he fired found its mark, cutting down Vorkans one by one. But for every one that fell, two more replaced them. The tunnel seemed to shrink around him, the air thick with guns, smoke, and adrenaline. And then, Arden stepped into view. His figure was unmistakable, standing at the head of the Vorkan line, his eyes cold, unfeeling. He held his rifle at ease, as though he was merely overseeing a job well done. His face was as emotionless as it had always been, but there was something else in his eyes now, something darker, more dangerous. "You're too late, Cortez," Arden said, his voice dripping with mock pity. "I've already won." Gabe's heart pounded as he squared off with his former comrade. "You haven't won anything, Arden," Gabe spat, his voice full of venom. "You're just a pawn in their game." Arden's smile was thin, almost cruel. "Then let me show you how it ends." In a flash, Arden raised his rifle, but Gabe was faster. He dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the blast. The shot rang out, hitting the wall beside him, sending sparks flying. He fired back, but Arden was already moving, disappearing into the darkness. Gabe cursed under his breath. It was a trap, no time to chase him down. He had to keep the fight alive. The Vorkans were closing in. "Get ready!" Gabe shouted to his team. "We fight for humanity, this ends here." The battle was all-consuming. Gabe's mind sharpened, every movement decisive. The Vorkans were relentless, but Gabe had no intention of letting them win. He and his squad fought with everything they had, pushing the aliens back step by step. But Arden's voice echoed again, sending a chill down Gabe's spine. "You'll never stop it, Cortez. It's already begun." And that was when Gabe realized the true scale of the war. The Vorkans weren't just trying to conquer, they were changing the game, reshaping the future. And humanity was about to learn the price of resistance. The station's lights flickered one last time before plunging into darkness. The Valiant Hold was on its final breath, and so was humanity's hope. But Gabe wasn't done yet. The war had only just begun. The sound of gunfire echoed through the maintenance tunnels, filling the air with the bitter scent of smoke and death. Gabe Cortez's pulse hammered in his ears, his breath ragged as his rifle clicked dry. He dropped to one knee, eyes scanning the advancing Vorkan forces. His squad was with him, but they were all battered, tired, running on fumes. "Get to the extraction point!" Gabe barked, even though he knew they didn't have much time left. The Valiant Hold was a wreck, collapsing around them with every passing second. The station's structural integrity was compromised, and they couldn't afford to stay in one place too long. The Vorkans were relentless, pushing harder as they neared their objective. Mendez, with blood dripping from a gash on his cheek, turned to Gabe. "We can't keep running, sir. We need to end this. We've been on the back foot long enough." "End it?" Gabe's voice was low but sharp. He didn't have the luxury of thinking that far ahead. The station was dying, and their chances of escaping were slim. "We end it when we've taken the fight to them, Mendez. And not a second before." Ahead, the shadowy figures of the Vorkans grew clearer. They moved with terrifying efficiency, their black armor gleaming in the flickering emergency lights. Gabe's stomach twisted as he recognized their leader, Wylar, the Vorkan's supreme commander. The alien was an imposing figure, taller than most, with cold, calculating eyes that seemed to pierce straight through Gabe. Zwylar's voice echoed in the tunnels, amplified by the station's damaged speakers. Cortez, you've fought bravely. But this ends now. You have no hope of winning. Gabe didn't flinch. We didn't ask for this war. But we'll finish it on our terms. Zwylar's laughter crackled through the speakers. You misunderstand, human. You've already lost. Your species is already a memory, a failed experiment. The galaxy belongs to the Vorkans now. Gabe tightened his grip on his rifle, teeth gritted. His hand brushed over the comms switch, sending a signal to his squad. The plan was simple: get to the main reactor core and overload it. It was a last-ditch move, but it was their only shot at taking down the Vorkans for good. The explosion would tear the Valiant Hold apart, but it could also cripple the Vorkan fleet long enough to buy humanity a fighting chance. Move! Gabe commanded, signaling for his squad to take positions. They'd have to fight their way through Zwylar's forces to reach the reactor. The clash was brutal, each shot fired a desperate plea for survival. Gabe's team was fighting with everything they had, every bullet, every movement, calculated. But they were outnumbered. Mendez fell first, taking a shot to the shoulder, but he fought on, dragging himself toward cover. Then Harris, his arms seared by plasma fire, stumbled, barely able to continue the fight. And yet they kept pushing. Gabe wouldn't let them stop. Not when they were this close. The hallways were choked with smoke, the echo of gunfire reverberating off the walls. The air was thick with tension, every step a gamble. Gabe's chest burned as he led the way, his eyes never leaving the shadows ahead. Then, they reached the reactor core. The massive room loomed before them, the heart of the Valiant Hold. Gabe wasted no time. He moved toward the console, fingers flying over the controls, inputting the overload sequence. The room hummed with power as the countdown began. We've got 5 minutes, Gabe said, his voice steady, despite the chaos around him. Get ready. Behind him, Mendez and Harris staggered to their feet, their wounds nothing more than another layer of resolve. The countdown ticked down, 4 minutes, 3 minutes. Gabe's mind was focused, but the reality of the situation crashed into him. He was watching his team fall apart, one by one, and there was nothing he could do to save them. He glanced up, locking eyes with Zwylar. The Vorkan's Supreme Commander stood at the entrance, watching them with cold amusement. You think this will stop us? Zwylar said, his voice booming in the room. You are insignificant. Your sacrifice will be for nothing. Gabe's jaw tightened. We'll see about that. The Vorkans surged forward, their soldiers flooding the room, but Gabe and his squad had one last fight in them. They fought like men possessed, taking down Vorkan after Vorkan. But the numbers were too great. It wasn't long before the first wave of Vorkans reached them. Harris fell, the last of his breath escaping as he pulled the trigger, taking down one of the aliens. Keep fighting! Gabe screamed. Stay focused! He could hear Mendez's labored breathing beside him. He turned just in time to see his squad mate go down, a Vorkan rifle grazing his side. But Mendez's eyes never lost their fire. It's not over, sir. Mendez coughed, grinning through the pain. We've still got a few tricks left. With one last effort, Gabe pushed the final command into the reactor's console. The timer hit 0. The explosion was deafening. The force of the blast shook the entire station, sending Gabe flying across the room. His body slammed against the wall, the impact knocking the wind out of him. The air was thick with smoke, and the station groaned as it began to collapse. The countdown had triggered a chain reaction that tore through the Vorkan fleet like a storm, sending their ships into disarray. Gabe struggled to his feet, his vision blurry. His limbs felt heavy, and blood dripped from a gash on his forehead. His squad was scattered around him, but they had done it. They had succeeded. The station was falling apart, and there was no escaping the chaos now. But Gabe couldn't help but feel a strange sense of victory. The Vorkans had been dealt a blow, one that would take them years to recover from. But there was no time to savor the moment. The ship was already disintegrating around him. Gabe staggered toward the nearest escape hatch, ignoring the pain that radiated from his body. He wasn't going to die here. Not today. As he reached the hatch, a shadow fell over him. Zylar. The alien stood amidst the wreckage, his face expressionless, yet his presence was overwhelming. For a brief moment, time seemed to freeze. You think you've won, human? Zylar's voice was cold, calculating. This is but a temporary setback. You cannot stop what is inevitable. Gabe turned toward him, bloodied but resolute. Maybe. But you won't be the one to see it. Not today. With that, Gabe shoved the hatch open and dove into the chaos of the space beyond. The station, the heart of humanity's last defense, shattered in a burst of light as the Valiant Hold became nothing more than a fiery tomb. Gabe's escape pod shot into the darkness of space, his mind still racing, but his heart strangely calm. He didn't know what the future held. But one thing was certain: humanity wasn't finished yet. The war was far from over. And Gabe Cortez, scarred but unbroken, would see it through to the end.